Man, what a disappointing year for comic book movies. We're coming towards the end of 2022, and all of this year's comic book movies have been released, so I figured I would rank all 8 of them from the worst to the best. This is the 8 DC and Marvel and Samaritan. That's the only other one included in there. I'm not including any of the specials like Werewolf by Night or the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. Theatrical releases only, so came out to a total of 8 movies. This has been a very strange year for comic book movies because I genuinely don't think any of these movies are great, including the one that most people think is great. And that placement on this list is going to piss a lot of people off. But this is going to be the first spoiler for my top 10 movies of the year list. This is going to be the first year in a long time where there is not a single comic book movie in my top 10 of the year, and that's just pretty disappointing. There is some stuff that looks promising for next year and in the future in general, but there were several movies this year, comic book movies, that I was very much looking forward to that did not live up to expectations whatsoever, and several of them are going to end up being on my most disappointing movies of the year list. So without further ado, let's get into number 8, and that's going to be Morbius. It's Morbin time, baby. God, this movie sucked. It wasn't just bad, it was also boring. The first 15, 20 minutes or so is somewhat promising, where you first see Michael Morbius as a vampire killing some people. Like, okay, this is somewhat interesting. Unfortunately, after that point, the movie completely falls off a cliff. You don't get anything that the trailers promised us. I mean, it was supposed to be about Morbius kind of battling with himself and the vampire side of himself and figuring out how to deal with that. Instead, it just becomes a super generic good vampire versus bad vampire battle, and the action is awful. It's just either really bad CGI or really bad slow-mo. The movie is just really clunky and doesn't flow very well. You can tell it was edited to hell. I mean, there were tons of scenes and lines of dialogue in the trailer that weren't in the movie at all. Tyrese and his cop partner had zero reason to be in this movie. You could have cut them out and would have changed nothing. I mean, would have cut down the runtime, but like Tyrese had a bunch of lines in the trailer that weren't in the movie. Just a very strange experience. It's like they kind of tried to go dark with it, but didn't fully commit, so it just ended up being super dull and boring and generic. Just such a bad comic book movie. And don't even get me started on those stupid-ass end credit scenes. Probably the 2 worst end credit scenes I've ever seen. Keaton, you're better than this. Please come back to the MCU. You are way too good for Sony and whatever the hell they're doing. Coming in at number 7 is going to be a movie I just watched for the first time last night in preparation for this video, and that is Samaritan. Look, I'm a Stallone fan, but this movie was not very good. It was a pretty exciting premise, Stallone being a superhero, but it ultimately ended up being pretty dull and at times boring and super generic. There's a twist towards the end of the movie that was super predictable. There's a little bit of fun in this movie with the action, but a lot of the action is also CGI effects heavy, and you can tell very easily that they're doing some movie magic there. I mean, Stallone is definitely too old for this shit, literally. Just not very interesting at all. The villain is super over the top, which does make for a few enjoyable moments, but also takes me out of the movie multiple times, and I don't really fully understand exactly what he was trying to do. Stallone's performance is even over the top at times, so just a movie that was pretty goofy and generic, and definitely could have been a lot better than it was. Number 6 is going to be Black Adam. This movie is fun. It knows exactly what it is. It is not great cinema. It is not a top-tier comic book movie by any stretch of the imagination. It is super predictable, a story we've seen a million times over. The villain sucks, and I don't understand their plan whatsoever. However, The Rock is very enjoyable as this character. He brings this charisma and screen presence and badassery that we always like to see. I mean, he is good at this type of thing, and I like the Justice Society quite a bit, especially Dr. Fate, played by Pierce Brosnan. He was awesome. There's some cool action in here, some funny moments. Again, super generic, super predictable, but I had a good enough time with Black Adam. Number 5, and God, it pains me to put this here, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This movie was my #1 most anticipated movie of this year. I was so much looking forward to this. Looked awesome. Such a cool concept. It was going to be so badass, so surprising, so intense, and it just wasn't that. I mean, my two biggest issues with the movie are massive ones, and one of them is that they failed to deliver on the premise of Multiverse of Madness. There was no Multiverse Madness whatsoever. The most they came up with was go on red, stop on green, and pizza in a bowl. All of the creative and interesting things you could have done with the multiverse, and that's the best they did. Very disappointing in that regard. And on top of that, I did not care for the characterization of Wanda whatsoever. I know a lot of people were totally okay with it. It was just too jarring for me. Her heel turn did not feel earned, given where we left off with her at the end of WandaVision.
That doesn't seem fair.
And then to just attribute it to this Darkhold, who is basically the thing that's actually behind everything that's going on. It's just a kind of a cheap plot device to have her do all these things, but not actually have it be her fault. And there's nothing else to really overcome. So that was just a bit disappointing for me. But certainly there's a lot to like about this movie. There's some really cool visuals. The score is great. I dug the directing from Sam Raimi, and the horror vibes really worked for me. It was also fucking gnarly at times for an MCU movie. Definitely the most brutal and gory MCU movie yet, so I enjoyed those aspects of it. It was an enjoyable movie. There was a lot of things to like about it from start to finish, but some also massive, massive frustrations for me that brought it down a significant amount. Number 4 is going to be the DC League of Super Pets. Look, I knew exactly what this movie was going to be when I went into it, but it delivered exactly what I expected and what I wanted. It is very entertaining. It is very funny. I love the voice acting from Kevin Hart and The Rock. Perfect choices for these characters. Some great banter between them and some of the other characters in the movie. Has some heart and a good message as well. It is certainly extremely predictable, and there isn't much plot here. In fact, the plot gets kind of confusing at times, and the villain certainly isn't very good. But I had fun with this movie. It was exactly what I expected. It is a fun kids movie, a good popcorn movie, good way to kill an hour and a half at the movies. And that post-credit scene was quite good as well. Number 3 is going to be Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Now, this movie certainly has a lot of things going for it. The acting is incredible across the board, especially Angela Bassett. She brings so much weight and emotion and gravitas to this role and to the movie, really elevates the movie. She should absolutely get nominated for Best Supporting Actress Oscar. If she doesn't, it will be an absolute travesty. So damn good. Letitia Wright is great as well. Winston Duke as M'Baku is awesome as well. Tenoch Huerta is phenomenal as Namor. Definitely one of the better MCU villains. It was a great introduction to the character. Can't wait to see him down the line. Definitely some good themes and a lot of heart in this movie. Unfortunately, I just felt like it was too long. Didn't have to be 2 hours and 40 minutes long. I definitely felt the runtime. There was a couple subplots in there that could have been tossed out and the movie would have flowed a lot better. Felt like they were just trying to set up future MCU projects, the Everett Ross stuff and the Ironheart stuff as well. And I am someone who is firmly in the camp of T'Challa should have been recasted. This movie did nothing to change my mind. I didn't like how they handled the character in the beginning of the movie, and T'Challa's presence was definitely missed throughout the entire movie, and that's what keeps the first one above this and why I didn't love this movie as much as a lot of people did. Did a lot of things right, but overall I left feeling just a bit disappointed because of the T'Challa stuff and because of the bloated runtime. So if you've been keeping track, you know what my top 2 movies are. And I debated switching these just so people wouldn't get so mad at me because I'm nervous about the reaction to this. But I made a vow when I started my YouTube channel to be completely honest about my opinions, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. And this is just that. It is just my opinion. It is not fact. It is not your opinion. It's just mine, and I will do the very best I can to explain why I have these movies placed where I do. So that being said, number 2 is going to be The Batman. Now, let me start by saying I am a Batman fanatic. I love the Dark Knight trilogy. The Dark Knight is my first or second favorite movie ever. Batman Begins is my favorite origin story of all time. The Dark Knight trilogy is my favorite trilogy of all time. I'm a Batman fanatic through and through, and I was so excited for this movie. Thought it was going to be amazing. The early buzz said it was amazing, but I just did not end up loving this movie as much as I wanted to, or as much as most people did. It certainly has a lot going for it. The acting is incredible across the board. Robert Pattinson is a great choice for Batman. Don't exactly love his Bruce Wayne, but hopefully we get more of that in the sequel. Zoe Kravitz is great as Catwoman. Jeffrey Wright is awesome as Gordon, and his relationship with Batman is definitely one of the better parts of the movie. Paul Dano as Riddler is great. Even John Turturro as Falcone, who seemed like weird casting to me, he was really good. But the person that really stole the show was Colin Farrell as Penguin. Holy shit, he was completely unrecognizable. He didn't just look different. He sounded nothing like Colin Farrell. Seemed like a completely different person.
Whoa, take it easy, sweetheart.
He completely disappeared into this role. Definitely the best part of the movie. Not only was he a great character with phenomenal acting, he's also the only character that really brought levity and humor to the movie outside of a couple lines from Jeffrey Wright's Gordon. And I can't wait to see what they do with this Penguin series starring Colin Farrell again, because God, he was incredible. Stole the show. The best part of the movie by far. Cinematography is great. It is very well directed and shot. The score is phenomenal. And it's a travesty that the score is not going to get nominated for Best Original Score. That is insane to me, as much as I was disappointed with this movie. The score was definitely great. Some cool action in here. Where my problems lie: the movie is way too long. It did not have to be 3 hours long by any stretch of the imagination. That final battle just felt like a tacked on fourth act to me. Felt completely unnecessary. It felt like the movie had a natural crescendo prior to that, and we just had to have this big final battle. Didn't feel like it fit with the rest of the movie, and I wasn't invested in any of it at all. Just felt like just carrying on because every comic book movie has to have this big final battle. So that was pretty disappointing. There was some very cheesy stuff at the end with him like walking people across. Like, really, this I understand what you're trying to say, but the visualization of it just looks kind of hokey to me. And then on top of that, Batman survives shit throughout this movie and is barely even damaged. Like, he gets a bomb explodes right in front of his face and he's totally fine. He gets shot like 1,000,000 times throughout this movie and it never hurts him except for one time towards the end for no reason. And nobody thinks to maybe shoot him in the face. Nobody accidentally shoots him in the face of all of these times he gets shot. So some of this stuff might seem like small stuff to people, but I also was not really a big fan of what they did with Thomas Wayne. Kind of tried to trick us into thinking he might not be who we thought he was. And then the very next scene, they go completely back on that. So that felt like a waste of time. I go even further in depth about my issues with this movie in my full review, but that is about as concisely as I can summarize it. So, movie that has a lot going for it, but I left feeling incredibly disappointed. Number one, God, people are going to be so mad at me. Thor: Love and Thunder. Look, I don't think this is a great movie. I said before filming this video, I don't think there was any great comic book movies this year. The movie certainly has problems. The tone isn't balanced super well. Christian Bale, even though he was phenomenal as Gore, kind of feels like he's in a different movie at times when it shifts so drastically from like goofy, like god of the dumplings to Gore being super scary. Kind of jarring. And there's definitely some plot holes, especially towards the end with like, wait a minute, how have we never heard of this ability before? Why have we never seen this before? These things could have been very useful. That being said, I had a blast with this movie. It was so much fun. Great visuals. I know people love to point out that one scene with Idris Elba's son, with Heimdall's son, and say, look at this horrible CGI. Yeah, it's not very good. Some people defend it by saying he doesn't really understand his powers yet, and that's why it's like that. I don't know if that's the case. That kind of makes sense. Maybe not. Maybe it's just bad CGI. But the rest of the movie has really good CGI. So it's really annoying that people like to point out and cherry pick that very specific scene. I see that scene on Twitter every day, and it annoys the hell out of me. Look, I understand if you didn't like this movie, but the hate for this movie on Twitter and social media in general has been so hyperbolic and over the top. It is so damn annoying. There's a lot to like about this movie. Thor and Jane's relationship is finally good. They actually have chemistry in this movie. I actually buy the relationship for once compared to the first two movies. I didn't think it was a very good idea to bring Natalie Portman back because of their lack of chemistry in the first two, but they absolutely proved me wrong. The heartfelt moments, a lot of people said they didn't land in this movie, absolutely landed for me, even though, again, the tone wasn't balanced super well. Those moments did land for me, the emotional moments. A lot of the humor landed. The goats, yes, got old, but then they put them on the back burner for a while and brought them back, and they were kind of funny again. Some really fun action in here. I do really like the characterization of Thor, and I will defend that to the death. Valkyrie is always a fun inclusion. I love Valkyrie. I had so much fun with this movie, despite its faults, and that's why I have it just ever so slightly above the Batman, because they're both movies that definitely have some issues, but I would rewatch Thor Love and Thunder way before I rewatch the Batman. So again, even if you don't agree, hopefully you can at least understand why I feel the way that I do. So there you have it, guys. There's my ranking of all 8 2022 comic book movies. Again, I know it's very controversial. Placing the Batman at number 2 below Thor Love and Thunder is going to be incredibly polarizing. But again, it's just my opinion, and hopefully I did a good job of explaining why I feel the way that I do about those two movies. How would you rank the 8 2022 comic book movies? Drop a comment below with your ranking, and if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Likes are super helpful, super important for pushing my videos out to more people and help growing my channel. If you enjoy my content in general, subscribe, hit the notification bell to get notified when I post a video, and stay tuned because I got a lot more end of the year stuff coming soon. I'll see you soon.